Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to give it about a minute or two before I start the webinar. We are having some people starting to log on to the event, so I just want to give everyone the time to settle themselves in. And we're also on Facebook Live, so I just want to make sure that everyone is just settling themselves into the webinar, whether they're on Zoom or Facebook Live. So as people are logging in, we haven't started yet. I'm just waiting for everyone to settle in. Please let me know in the chat. I think I have the chat enabled for everyone. I do. So if you are having audio or video difficulties, just please let me know in the chat and I will be more than happy to help assist you there. I'll just give it another minute. Okay, so I see the chat is disabled. So after I do my introductions, I will head over to the chat section and I will enable that for everyone. Okay, so I'm just going to do a brief introduction. Welcome everyone to our webinar. My name is Sandra and I'm going to help with moderating the event today. Today we're going to be talking about how you can stand out as a job seeker. We have two presenters from TorontoJobs.ca. We have Eglys Perez, she is the Director of Recruiting, and we also have Miranda Nolan, she is the Recruitment Assistant. If you have any technical difficulties, just as I mentioned at the beginning, please let me know in the chat. There's also a Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen if you're watching from Zoom, and you can also post your questions in there. Eglys and Miranda will do their best at the end to answer any of the questions that we get throughout the presentation. And we'll also be leaving our contact information in the chat section as well. In case we don't get to all the questions, you're more than welcome to send them through to our email address. I think that's it from my end. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I will pass it over to Eglys.
Thank you, Sandra. Thanks so much. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope that this brings a little bit of some perspective or some insight from a recruiter's point of view. Of course, as you may know, TorontoJobs.ca is a variety of things, but one of those is a recruitment division and essentially a team of recruiters that work with many job seekers across the GTA to match them up with some of our clients' positions. So hopefully you'll get some good insight and some good information today. So I'm Eglys and I am the Director of Recruiting here at TorontoJobs.ca, and I look forward to hopefully getting some good questions at the end and sharing some of our expertise with you. I'll introduce Miranda as well.
Hi, I'm Miranda. I am the recruitment assistant, so I work very closely with Eglys. I'm very excited to be here today and to give you all some great tips.
Excellent. All right, so let's get started. Today we have a total of 5 tips per se, or points that we want to discuss to job seekers and kind of helping everyone stand out or be at their best while applying for work. So we'll start with the first tip, and that is basically creating your perfect resume. So I know a lot of people struggle with this, especially those who are either entering the job market for the first time as recent graduates, or people who just haven't created a resume because they've been at the same job for a very long time. They haven't had the need to enter the job or the job market. So one thing that I will say, because I know that daily there's of course a lot of newcomers to Canada, and there's a lot of people who are trying to figure out what the best format is, I would say make sure that you're adapting your resume to a Canadian style resume, and not just resume, but also cover letters. What that means is, making sure that there's no, well, nowadays we see a little bit more pictures, but generally speaking, I would say majority of resumes still don't have pictures on them. They do not have personal information, meaning you're married, your marital status, or anything of the sort. Really, it's just about keeping it very professional, very to the point. You know, one of the biggest struggles for creating a resume is keeping it condensed as well. For those who have a lot of experience, typically it can be challenging with, you know, keeping all that experience to 2 or 3 pages max. But that is the recommendation always, is to try to take out anything that's redundant. So if you're doing the same thing, you've been doing the same thing for the last 3 jobs, you don't have to necessarily repeat all that. You know, just being very particular or picky with your words, and also not being over wordy. So kind of getting to the point in a professional manner. So again, the standard is about 2 to 3 pages maximum. But of course, if you have to go over, as long as the resume looks very neat and easy to follow, then, you know, that's okay. I would say, adding to that, really just that less is more. You know, and what that means is, you know, most hiring managers or recruiters will take a look at your resume, and they're going to be looking for specific keywords, or of course just kind of going through the flow of your resume, so looking for any gaps. And you know, you don't have to go through every single detail of your career. You're really just making it an outline, and again, very easy to follow or read for the hiring manager who's picking it up. And then the last tip on this, I would say, is make sure that you understand the difference between the different styles of resumes. So there's actually, well, I put here 2 kinds, but there's actually 3 kinds of resumes. There's chronological, functional, and then the combination of both. But what I'll do is I'll just distinguish between chronological and functional resumes. So chronological is probably the most common. If you're not familiar, it's the one that, you know, you line up your experience in order of the most recent to the least recent. And that's, you know, how you're going to follow your experience in your resume. The functional is where your resume, or the bulk of your resume, is emphasizing more of your skill set or your qualities rather than your experience in order. And I think it's really important to understand the difference, because there's not one shoe size fits all. One of them could be better suited to you or your background. So get to know the 2. Functional resumes, though they're not as common, they still can be really great for people who have extensive experience and they're not sure how to really put that in chronological order. They might say, you know what, I've had a lot of contracts, or I've been working 3 jobs at the same time. So instead of doing a chronological resume, which looks a little bit messy, I might try a functional resume, which focuses on the skill sets that I have or have acquired through my career. And then, of course, there'll be a small portion of that outlines the experience or the positions you've held. Okay, so I can't get too far into that because it could be a whole session on that, but I would definitely say get familiar with those 2. All right, and I will pass the baton on to Miranda.
Okay, so our second point here is being strategic and planning. So, you know, have a plan in mind to find the job that you really want to do, or that you really want to get. So if you're applying to the same kind of positions, you should be able to get familiar and plan ahead. You know, searching online, narrowing down exactly what job that you actually want. You know, there's job fairs and things like that. So really narrowing down and planning out what you're going to be doing. And then, of course, keeping track of your application. So you want to stay organized throughout your job search. When you get the call for an interview, or, you know, a screening or whatever it is, you want to know which job that they're calling for. And when you get that interview, you want to know what job that you applied for and all of the information that, you know, was already given to you, you know, just so you know that you're organized, they're organized, and you're all on the same page. And then, so the last point here, getting to know the job market in your desired field. So basically, if you're applying to similar jobs on similar job boards or wherever it is, you're starting to get familiar with what is the standard for that job or that field. You don't want to go into an interview and ask for double the salary that is standard for that position or that field. You want to really get to know and what to expect. So just being strategic in all of the things that you do.
I'd like to add a point to that, if that's okay. Something that comes up a lot in recruitment and constantly interviewing candidates is asking or finding out the reason why someone's looking for a change, looking for a new job. And that's a very, very important thing for the job seeker to think about first. So my recommendation is, before you enter an interview or start your job search or decide that you're going to leave your company, think about what that reason is for you and really reflect or try to contemplate how that will appear or come off to the hiring manager when you are doing interviews, because you will get that question. Recruiters get that question every day from our clients, from the hiring managers, is why is this person looking for a change? Why is this person looking for a new job? And that question, that answer will matter to them, right? Whether they think it's a valid or good answer, or if it's an answer that for example, if it means that they're going to be jumping a lot in their career, if it's, if they think that they're not going to be able to satisfy that answer and provide them what they're looking for. So really just think about that as a job seeker. Why am I looking? And, how is that going to come forward? How is that going to come through to the hiring managers? All right, we'll move on to the next tip. So number 3 is get involved. So this, is something that's not going to happen overnight, but it is really important nowadays. It's more relevant than ever, especially in the era of social media. We're all connecting online. So if it's not in person, there's lots of different ways to get involved with the right communities online as well. So again, just going back to social media, finding out what other job seekers are doing, if there are platforms for, similar or job seekers in the similar field, but also perhaps joining some groups on LinkedIn or other platforms that have, people with the same ambitions, or have leaders or people that are thriving in that field that perhaps can pass on some knowledge, and just kind of getting to know what's trending right now, what's in the hashtags and what's going on in your field. It's going to keep you up to date. It's going to keep you relevant in what you're trying to be a part of. So again, just making sure that you're involved, not just on the job boards, but really on any of those groups, webinars, any events that are taking place in person or online. Also, just joining alumni groups, I would say, is a big one. So, not everyone gets to do that, but if you do have the opportunity or the privilege to, come from at least a Canadian, I don't know other places, but Canadian colleges or universities or programs, designations, there are usually alumni groups that come with that. So make sure that you're taking advantage of that and you're taking part in those groups. Usually they'll have their own pages on social media, they'll have their own events, they'll have their own chats, and there's a lot of resources there, right? So it's a lot of people that you could possibly reach out to, whether if it's asking questions, getting suggestions, or so on. All right, moving it back to Miranda.
Okay, so our 4th tip here, so enhancing your interview skills. So basically you want to be prepared in a sense that you know what to expect, but you might not exactly know what the question will be, but you want to have something prepared. So, looking up the common interview questions, the common interview answers and things like that can really help you feel like you, practice what you want to say in the actual interview and help you feel prepared just overall. because you don't know exactly what they're going to ask, but they might ask these common questions. You can have your friends pretend to be the interviewer and just practice, answering the questions and how a normal way that you would say it. You don't want to be too nervous. So definitely practicing beforehand. And then always showing up prepared. So for an interview, you want to be at least, 10, 15 minutes early. You don't want to show up late or anything like that. Ahead of time, a really great idea would be to research about the company itself, to show your enthusiasm for the job, for the company, to show that you're really, diligent and dedicated to this actual position, just, to show your interest level. Be prepared to market yourself. So, bringing up the highlights of your work experience, key skills that you think would transfer into this potential job. If you have a certain education level, you might want to just bring up things that you learned there and just market yourself basically, but not in a braggy way. And then, after the interview, something that is very common is to send a thank you. So, in today's world, a simple email would be sufficient, sending them, thank you so much for your time today. Like, I really hope I get to hear back from you and things like that, just to solidify the interview and really show your interest for that job.
Yeah, wonderful. I will say also with the thank you letter, it gives you an opportunity to clarify anything that you may have missed or mention anything that you may have missed in the interview as well. So it's kind of a nice opportunity just to, go over anything that you feel wasn't clear or emphasize on anything that you want. But of course, in a very tactful way, professional way, and also not making the email about that. It really needs to be about saying thank you for the opportunity. Great. Next. So our fifth point today, it's going to be how to consult or making sure that you're consulting with others. So we put a little bit of a list together, but again, it doesn't mean it's limited to this. What we're saying is that it does take a village sometimes, and really it's looking for that perfect job sometimes can use a little bit of help. So working with recruiters is wonderful. I've been doing this a very long time, and it's a very rewarding part of my job to be able to help a job seeker or candidates with, anything, whether it's a recommendation, whether it's, resume tips, or, maybe just finding them a connection, interviews. Though, I can't, as a recruiter, it's impossible for me to find everybody that perfect match they're looking for all the time, just because of, the odds, right? There's more candidates than there are positions. But still, if we can help in any way or just be a good resource, then that hopefully is valuable to you. Professors are wonderful. And I'm sure Miranda can maybe speak to this, but, as recent graduates, hang on to those connections, right? Keep in touch with your professors, whether it's just, making sure you have their numbers or connecting with them or sending them a, happy holiday card during Christmas, anything that keeps you connected, because professors have wonderful resources, and they're often wonderful references as well when you're entering the job market. Anything you'd want to add to that, Miranda?
Yeah, so basically just exactly what you said, they would be great references, great, mentors and things like that. So it's always great to keep in touch with your professors.
Yeah, wonderful. Resume writers. A lot of people don't actually know still that there are professional resume writers out there. And yes, there are. So there are people that you can actually reach out to that will sit down for you. Now, sometimes it's at a cost, sometimes it's not, depends on the person, but they will sit down with you for a certain amount of time to go over and help you write that perfect resume that we first discussed. So make sure to keep that in mind. If a resume is something that you're really struggling with, this is definitely something you'd want to consider. Next is employment centers. Though it is, sometimes different than, let's say, recruiters, it's not necessarily the same thing. Employment centers are more community service based, and they have ton of resources a lot of the time, whether it's workshops, whether it's just, contacts. Them usually they're involved in different events, and they usually have a network of their own. So community centers or employment centers are a wonderful place to start if you're especially new to Canada, or if you're new to the job market and you're just looking for some resources or some tips. And the last on this list, again, not limited to this list, but is co-op placements. So if you're lucky enough to enter a program that, in your career that possibly could offer a co-op placement, I strongly suggest to take that co-op placement. If you have the choice between two programs, one without the co-op and one with the co-op, I would strongly recommend to take the one with the co-op. And that's simply because it gets you out in the workplace right away. It gets you exposed to what you think you want to go or want to do. And maybe you do, or maybe you don't, right? I mean, it's really only one way to find out. And that co-op experience will allow you to test the waters and get a little bit of an idea or a first glance at what you're striving for. And then, of course, there's going to be tons of contacts that you're going to make at the co-op placement. So all of that is really invaluable, and strongly recommend that if you have the opportunity to take a program, try to see if it can include a co-op program or an internship. All right. So I think that wraps up our 5 points. I know we're going to leave some time for Q&A. I think there may be already some questions. So we'll go ahead back to Sandra and see if there's some questions we want to start with.
Yes, yeah, we do have some questions here. So one question that we have is whether or not a cover letter is something that is a must or if it's optional. This job seeker is saying that they've noticed that a lot of job applications are asking for cover letters.
Okay, that's a great question. So cover letters are, something that's still traditional, still relevant. I would say, depending on how you're applying, it's either a yes or a no. I will say if you're going through a recruiter, usually the answer is no. Recruiters don't need cover letters. We will act as your cover letter, so you don't need to use one with us unless it's a very, very senior position. In that case, I think it's usually a nice touch. But if you're applying on your own, then I would say yes, definitely have a cover letter ready, because a lot of the time I know with even automatic or auto applications, they will ask you to upload your cover letter plus your resume, and that's just an expectation that's still set. So I would say for those who are thinking, oh my goodness, do I have to create a new cover letter every time? No, you don't have to, but I would just organize it in a way that there's a few things you can change depending on the position, and everything else is more templated.
Okay, another job seeker is asking if you can shed some light on the usage of ATS screening for job applications. Is it still widely used?
Yes. Yes. Like I said, like application tracking systems, ATS. Yes, I mean, every company, most companies, I would say, if not every company nowadays, is using one or another. Yes, we do have social media. A lot of job boards are obviously being used, but many companies, especially bigger ones, are using their own ATS systems, or are using that of recruiters or whatnot. So I would say it's still very relevant. But as a job seeker, you don't have to go out and look for that. You should automatically have, that's on the back end. So you just will see a job post and apply. The ATS is on the back end of the hiring manager.
Another question we have here is, what do you recommend for job seekers when they are looking for a job? I guess, what's your recommendation for how they can look for jobs? This job seeker is describing that they've looked for jobs online, and they haven't really received that response back. So I guess they're wondering, is it best to continue searching for jobs online, or is it to go into the offices and to actually physically give in your cover letter and resume? I guess what's the best way to go about finding a job? Yeah.
Right. Nowadays, I would be hesitant to recommend going into offices directly. I know, of course, we're still kind of in this pandemic, era, and that can be sensitive. What I would recommend is to look at, first, I would actually just start back to drawing board and make sure that you have a really, really confident looking resume, because a lot of the time you kind of think, well, if I've applied to 30 positions and I haven't got one response, maybe it is something you can change on your resume. Maybe we can go back and see if there's any areas that you can strengthen up. And again, going back to perhaps getting a resume writer or, working with someone else who can help you with that. But really, in terms of applying itself, I would say, continue with the usual sources, the job boards, the social media, the career websites. But I would say it doesn't hurt to see if there's direct contact information. So email addresses that you can follow up with, right? Here, so-and-so, I wanted to really demonstrate my interest or express my interest for this position and whatnot. So, it doesn't hurt to reach out by email, but I wouldn't show up in person if that's an option. Yeah.
We have another question asking about employment gaps. So this job seeker was laid off, or they never had an employment gap until 2020 when they were laid off due to COVID. And then now in 2022, tech layoffs are happening. So how would you go about describing that on your resume and applying to jobs?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think this is a really important one. I think employers are starting to open up to the idea that, yes, there are many, many people with gaps on their resume, especially as of 2020. But it also, as a job seeker, it's okay to put in brackets on your resume with that position laid off, right? Due to restructuring or just, restructure, however you want to word it, it's okay to put it, especially when it comes to the 2020 to now pandemic era. I think that's okay. I think a lot of employers will look at that and accept it and not look at it in a negative way. It's just the reality of, what's happened.
And the second question that this job seeker has is, should they apply to a job if they only have 50% of the required skills / experience?
That, that's an interesting one. Normally, I would say no. I would say, it's really best that you have at least 70%, 80% of that experience. But I would say depends, because if it's like, if you have the education, if you have the years, or, maybe you're missing a couple years of experience, let's say they want 4 years of experience, but you only have 2, and you have, the computer skills, except for one thing, you know what I mean? I think it depends, but I would say generally try to stick to those positions that you have like 75%, or but at the same time, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to just apply, right? I think as long as you're not applying to the same company over and over, or they're, to different positions and it's confusing for them, as long as you're avoiding some of those situations, it doesn't hurt to apply. But I will say, try to increase your odds by looking at those 75% matches.
Another question is, how can newcomers balance their professional experience with the fact that they're looking for their first job in Canada?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I would go back to making sure you're adapting your resume to a Canadian style resume. That's very, very important. I'll tell you, as a recruiter and hiring manager, you want to see that someone's taken the time and effort to really, really showcase their resume in the most professional manner. The other thing is, I would just, again, go use as many resources as you can. Employment centers are wonderful for newcomers. And again, resume writers, recruiters. The other thing is look at what's being posted for the field that you want to be in. and see what the common factors are, what the common qualifications are, and make sure that you're working towards that, right? So if there isn't some kind of designation or there's some kind of, background they're looking for, make sure that you're working towards that if that's really your goal.
What's the best way to approach an online recruiter? So let's say you're getting a message for a remote position through LinkedIn. What's the best way to approach a message like that?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn's a great tool because, of course, there is the option to message people directly. Most of the time, most people are open to that. So if you are seeing or, recruiter, you're coming across a recruiter online, go for it, message them. Recruiters are used to this, right? We welcome it. I think any good recruiter welcomes that. We're happy to connect with as many people as possible. As a recruiter, I strongly believe that there is a right job for everybody. It's just about timing. And though I may not have an opportunity today for you, I may have one tomorrow or in a month from now. So it's just about connecting and going ahead and introducing yourself.
And I guess just further to that question, are there any red flags when being approached by recruiters? Anything that a job seeker should look out for?
If a recruiter tries to charge you, run. So never accept a recruiter that's charging you. As a job seeker, that's not at all something you should be worried about. No, I mean, I would just say, have an open conversation. If they approached you about a position and you're not really sure how you're a match, it's okay to ask, I'm curious to see why you approached me about this position. Is there something like, what did you see in my profile or in my resume that you thought could be a match to this position, right? I think that's sometimes scares people off, but it shouldn't. It's just an open conversation.
Another question is, how do I find resume writers, and can I send my resume to TorontoJobs.ca?
You can always send your resume to TorontoJobs.ca. We welcome it. It's resumes@TorontoJobs.ca is actually our recruiter inbox. So please go ahead and send us your resume anytime. In terms of resume writers, we don't necessarily have resume writers that we're working with at the moment, but I know if you just Google it and you look up some online, there should be some that are local to you or available to you online. Also, you can ask around, right? I would ask any of your peers to see if anyone's, or, your alumni groups or whatever you're in, those groups that have similar job seekers to see if they've ever used one.
Okay, so we are running out of time here. So I'm just going to ask one more question. We have a job seeker asking, what's the difference between TorontoJobs.ca and Gahuza?
Okay, a good question. So I would say in a nutshell, we're sister companies. So TorontoJobs.ca has been around for a long time. It's an established organization. As you know, it's a job board, it's a recruitment firm, and we've also done many events throughout the years. So it's been around for a long time. Gahuza is this, it's an up and coming platform for job seekers to be able to be matched to different opportunities and interview live with hiring managers or employers. So it's a very different, it's not the same at all as TorontoJobs.ca. It's actually very different. It's up and coming. If you haven't checked it out, I strongly encourage you to do that. Miranda is on it all the time. So I don't know if you want to add to anything about Gahuza.
Yeah, so Gahuza is not your typical, job board like platform. It's completely different. You're going to be able to be matched with the jobs and interview live right then and there with the hiring manager or the recruiter. And it's really great. I would highly recommend, signing up if you're on the job search.
Yeah, and I believe you get instant messages if you are matched, right? Yeah.
Okay, all right. So unfortunately, we are running out of time for questions. In the chat, I did post. I posted Gahuza.com. I posted the resumes email, and I also posted the info@TorontoJobs.ca email if anyone else has any more questions that they would like to ask. We also had another question about whether or not we are recording the webinar, and we are recording the webinar, so it will be up on our YouTube channel, and there will be an email that goes out as well, so everyone can have access to that recording. Miranda, Eglys, I don't know if there's anything else that you would like to add before we close everything out.
Nothing I would add, but just say thank you for everybody who's attended today, and hope we again added some value.
Yes, thank you so much for everyone who attended today.
Thank you, everyone.